Hi and welcome to the Take Control of the Noisy Class videos. Now in this video I want to give you a little used and often forgotten but very effective way of taking control of really tough groups of students right at the start of lessons. So this is for those groups that take ages to settle, are very noisy and disruptive, and they cause you a lot of stress and take a lot of time getting to settle down. Now before I do that, I want to explain why I know this is so effective and how I know it can make a huge difference if you're struggling with this particular type of class. You see, when I first started teaching, I was actually really useless at classroom management. I had two basic strategies, both equally ineffective for dealing with groups of students. And the first one was shouting. So when they didn't do as I asked, I used to shout at them. And if they still didn't do as I asked, I used to shout a bit louder, until eventually I was shouting at the top of my voice. Now if you get to the point where you're yelling and screaming at the kids, as I was, and they're still ignoring you, you've basically lost all credibility. You've shown that you have no control whatsoever. And in my particular case, the kids were just laughing at me. So that was a very ineffective strategy to use. So my second strategy was my clutching at straws strategy, and this was when everything had got on top of me and nothing was working. I used to send the kids out, and often I would only have half the kids left in the classroom because I just got so frustrated with them. The message I was giving to the kids was, I can't control you, so I'm going to send you to somebody who can. So again, I had no credibility and they didn't see me as someone who was in control. But also, a lot of the other members of the staff could see that I wasn't in control as well. And that really hit me hard. That added to my stress and my frustration. Now I went from that situation, through trial and error and through learning from other colleagues and learning from videos and books, I went from that situation of not being able to control kids to being able to go into pretty much any classroom at all and be able to get almost instant respect and control and compliance from the kids. And I was able to build really trusting, positive bonds with some of the most challenging and challenged kids in the school, really very quickly. So I went from not being able to manage behaviour to being able to manage behaviour very well. And my point is that anyone can do this. And my aim with these videos is to give you simple, proven strategies that will enable you to manage your classroom, succeed with and get the most from some of the most challenging kids you're facing, and reduce the stress and the amount of time that you're spending trying to deal with these kids so that you can enjoy your job more. So with that said, let's get on to our first video, which is our little used and often forgotten strategy for taking control of tough groups right at the start of the class. So first of all, let's have a look at what's going on. Why do some groups take so much longer to settle down than others right at the start of the lessons? And I'm going to use this rather fantastic drawing as an example. So here we have our classroom and we have our group of students outside the room, and let's imagine that this is quite a loud bunch. This is quite a boisterous group of students, so there's a bit of talking going on. We'll put a speech bubble there, but we'll do it with a pen that works. Classroom Management 101, you must always have a marker pen that actually writes on the board. So we'll put our little speech bubbles on just to show that there's a bit of talking going on. There might be some pushing and shoving, a bit of larking about. We might even have the odd expletive coming out, particularly if it's an older group, so I'll put the internationally recognised symbol for I am a rude child up there. Just so you get the picture that this is a loud group of students outside the classroom. Now at some point they're going to go in the room and they're going to push their way in and shove their way in. There might be one or two lagging behind. But the point is they're going into that classroom out of control. And when you get them in that classroom, you've then got to spend your time settling them down and getting them ready to learn. That's going to take you a long time because at this point these kids are still in party mode. Okay, they may have come from a really fun, active lesson, they may have come from PE, or they may have just been talking over break, or they may have just been chatting through the corridors as they're walking towards your classroom. The point is that they are not ready to immediately settle down, ready to learn at this point. Now, from a psychological point of view, if you let those kids in when they're out of control, there's an imbalance of power. They are entering your classroom on their terms, and that's where a lot of the problems lie. If they're coming into your classroom not fully under your control, there's an imbalance of power and they're not going to listen to your instructions. They'll have no regard for your rules. So what's the solution? Well, you probably worked out that if a lot of the source of the problems is letting the kids in the classroom when they're out of control, it's at this point here, at the door, that we need to take control. It's at this point that we need to position ourselves as an authoritative leader It's at this point here that we need to set the tone for the lesson so that the kids are ready to listen to our instructions and ready to enter that classroom under our control. You see, a lot of teachers feel that classroom management is what happens inside the classroom. And that's why this is a often forgotten, little used strategy, because they forget that classroom management actually takes place outside the classroom too. It's outside the classroom that relationships are built. It's outside the classroom where you set the tone for the rest of the lesson so that they enter that classroom under your control, ready to follow instructions. But the way we do this, the way we take control at the door, is absolutely crucial. Because if you're shouting at them and yelling at them and screaming at them or barking orders at them or reading the riot act in the corridor, you're likely going to make your job of getting them settled to work even more difficult for yourself, for two reasons. Teachers that shout and yell and scream at kids tend to get very little respect. Deep down, students are not going to give their best work to a teacher they don't respect. Secondly, as I've said earlier, some students are just going to ignore you when you shout at them. So you're going to get the situation where students are entering the classroom already having made up their mind that they're not going to listen to you. There's no point in listening to you. They're completely ignoring you. And that's going to make the job of getting them to do as you ask very, very difficult. So a much better way is to settle them down gradually. We've got to gradually move them into a state where they are much more likely to listen to what you're saying, much more likely to do as you ask, and therefore much more likely to settle down to work when you tell them to do so. Very importantly, they're going to be moving into this classroom on your terms, following your acceptable rules for appropriate behaviour. Now the way we do that is, I need my red pen for this bit, firstly by making non-confrontational statements, and two, with a little bit of informal chit-chat, which I'll explain in a moment. Okay, first of all, non-confrontational statements. What do I mean by that? Well, confrontational statements are those where you're talking about the things that are going wrong. You're accusing students for doing things wrong. You're blaming them for doing things wrong. You're talking about the behaviours that you don't want to see. So it's things like, Paul, why are you always late? Or Carly, why are you always making so much noise? You two, stop fighting. You, get lined up against the corridor. We're talking about things that we don't want to see, and it basically just reinforces that behaviour and sets a very negative tone for the rest of the lesson. Non-confrontational statements are reinforcing the things that we do want to see. So it's reminding students about the things that they are doing right and encouraging others to do it right as well. So Paul, thanks very much for being on time. I see you've got a pen as well, brilliant. Let's have you lined up quietly with everyone else, brilliant. What a great group. We've got all this lot lined up perfectly. We're just waiting for a few more to line up as well. Carly, I'm so pleased that you've settled right down. You look as if you're ready to come in and start work. Thank you very much. Those sorts of statements are going to reinforce those behaviours that we do want to see. Now secondly, we've got informal chit-chat. And there's no doubt that teachers who are comfortable chatting with their students outside the classroom, in the bus queue or at break time, in the corridors, tend to get much more respect from their students and tend to find students responding much more positively to them. So you need to be able to chat with your students comfortably outside the classroom. It's also a great time to divide and conquer. So rather than trying to address the whole group at once, you're just moving through small groups and chatting to small groups and individual students. Now, if you're not comfortable chatting with your students, and you really need to be, you need to get into kid culture. Start watching the films they watch. Start watching the TV programs they watch. Look at the fashions. Look at the jokes, the humour that they're into. And then you're down on their wavelength. You can't expect them to come up to your wavelength. You've got to get down to theirs if you want their respect. So a teacher who stands po-faced and can't chat with those students isn't going to get the same level of respect as someone who can get down to their level. Now, you'll find that when you follow this process of non-confrontational reminders about what you do want to see and a little bit of informal chit-chat, you very quickly see this group start to settle down into a more manageable frame of mind. And you'll then find it much easier to get them to listen to your instructions when you do want to get them to start work. Now in the next video, I'm going to show you a way of getting them from here into the classroom and sat down, actually working straight away with minimal fuss and with minimal fighting. And I'm also going to show you how we deal with those students who don't settle down straight away and don't follow your instructions. So make sure you watch out for the next video, and please, if you've enjoyed this one, please leave a comment in the box below. Okay, I'll see you on the next page.